how do we make sure that we ensure performance and people and purpose? Like all three of those have to be there ideally for us to really flourish and be our full selves at work. So the book is called Expand the Circle because I was thinking about my leadership, how it developed from a point of self-awareness. And then if I expand that circle out to having to learn how to lead one other person, like how can I be a leader in that one-on-one, expand out further to my team, to my entire organization, even out into the world. It doesn't stop, right? Sometimes we draw an artificial boundary around work, but we show up as leaders to our families, to our communities, to our school systems, to wherever we're needed. That's what leadership is.
This is Conquer Contractor Chaos, built for the contractor that's ready to run a business that works for them and creates the life they've been fighting for. Tune in to get the tools, systems, and strategies that are battle-proven to set you free. One move each episode, straight talk, things you can use today. Take your time back, be home for dinner, do the work, lead your crew, love your family, conquer the chaos.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Conquer Contractor Chaos Show. Today, I am interviewing a man who's pretty established in his field and has become what is known as the godfather of talent. And we use a tool that Matt has been part of called the Predictive Index. And if you're in the program already, if you're in one-on-one coaching with me, you would have been through the PI, you would have seen the value that it brings in recruitment and talent optimization, and even just the tools that it gives you to be a great leader. And so we wanted to get Matt on today to break it down for us. What is psychometric profiling? Why is it important? And really, how can we use it to grow big, sustainable, and fun contracting companies? Matthew, thank you for joining the show today.
Lee, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matthew, obviously, like, this has been a long journey. You're a PhD, you have a PhD. You're called the godfather of talent. You're an established author of Expand the Circle, which is an amazing book. I highly recommend. Matt, where did the PI start for you? Where did you find the interest? What led you down the path to creating the PI?
Yeah, it's interesting. I started off with military service, U.S. Marine Corps. Really enjoyed my time. I enjoyed the investment and leadership. I was an enlisted person, jumping out of airplanes, all that fun stuff as a much younger man. And when I got out, I wanted to continue my leadership development, and I got into the civilian world, in my case, building software. And I was basically told, yeah, we don't really do that here. And I was so confused. I thought all adults just got access to leadership training. I thought that's what adults did at work. No, not the case at all. So I was left to kind of self-study. So I was very interested in psychology. I ended up getting my undergrad degree in psychology because I was fascinated by the mind and what we know about people and how we can help them have better lives and better work and better everything else. So when I had the chance to get my PhD in psychology, it was really studying leadership and coaching. And this was right around 2006. And that was the same time that I was introduced to the Predictive Index, a tool that was created in 1955 based on the psychology of the day. But I ended up taking the PI, using it with our teams to understand how to hire better, how to coach better, how to improve team dynamics. I really loved it. So a couple of years later, 2013, I was offered the opportunity to join Predictive Index and to start to run product for them. And I've been there for more than 12 years at this point. So had a chance to really invest in the software that we use, the nature of the training, the consulting. I've seen it from every angle, 10,000 clients plus around the world. Really just enjoy being able to work with the tool every day to be able to help people have better work and make the world a better place as a result.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I strongly believe you are doing that for sure. Even from an optimizing the employer to the employee relationship, giving employers to get better tools to be better leaders to people. And I think that's a very admirable cause for sure. So obviously, like, you've been in the military, you've seen a whole manner of different people, and you understand that they have different personalities and character traits. Where does a typical employer fall short? Like, why are they not using tools like that? Is it because they're just not commonly known, or, where's the disconnect there? Why isn't everybody using the PI?
Yeah, there seems to be a real divide, doesn't there, between the sort of the haves and the have-nots when it comes to using tools like Predictive Index to be able to understand their employees, their candidates, their leaders, And really, so it seems almost like there's two camps. One is we can just do this by gut. We can probably just figure it out. We're okay with guesswork. We're okay if we get it wrong at the margins. Versus those who are like, you know what, it's pretty cost effective and fast to be able to get the data and use the data. So I would say being data driven, being more scientific in our approach, not in a heavy handed way, not in an overly onerous way. It doesn't take a lot of time. I think that's the real difference. And I think that it really shows. When I was in the service, they really used a lot of the data they could get their hands on to be able to execute their mission. And they're very good at what they do, those Marines. So it was very much more familiar to me when I got in saying, let's demystify this process. We can't have randomness. We can't have sort of this crapshoot mentality when it comes to hiring, for example, because that can be very expensive. I know your listeners are struggling sometimes. If you make a bad hire, it is the worst feeling, Lee. You know what it's like. You hire somebody, you think, finally, I can get back to my full-time job, right? Because I'm not distracted. And then they quit because it was a bad fit. And you're like, oh no, it's actually worse than it was when I was just looking the first time. And I think that's exactly what happens. And when I see what's happening in the trades in particular and in the construction industry, it's challenging and it's very diverse. There are some parts of the country that are having a really hard time finding individuals to take these roles. In some cases, because for entry-level jobs, sometimes there's still a stigma from Gen Z to want to come in and take these jobs. Sometimes the local municipalities won't let us build low-income housing, and so we just have a hard time trying to bring people in. It can be very competitive. And in fact, certain skills are holding back our ability to cook off the backlog. So when we have a chance to make a hire, we need to be able to open up that talent pool a little bit, make sure we find people who are a good behavioral fit for the job because they can learn the skills, but we've got to make sure we get access to them. And so I think that it's starting to change. More employers are starting to wake up and understand, you know what, adding a little bit of psychometric profiling, a little behavioral insight can really help us remove a lot of friction in the hiring process, yes, but also once they become an employee, that sort of management and even career development process.
Yeah, I think you're totally bang on. And you touched on this. It's very, very hard in the construction industry to hire someone just start like as it is normally. We only get one shot. When you're in that kind of pinnacle of you're about to take that next big step in your business, you only get one shot to hire that next stud, that next A player. How do you know he's an A player just based off a couple of conversations or a resume? We typically recommend use the PI as part of your funnel to get you one step closer. Like you said, is a person on paper. It's like the receipt or the profit and loss statement for your business is showing you exactly how you're performing. That's exactly what the PI is. And we love it. That's exactly why we love it. Curious, Matt, what's your PI result?
Oh, I'm a persuader. So
You're a
very
persuader.
socially oriented. That's my strongest factor. Probably my weakest factor is routine. So I like to have a lot of variety, a lot of novelty. I like to meet a lot of new people on the regular. I like to have some amount of dominance and assertion, some chance to get my fingerprints on decisions and projects. And I need a little bit of detail when it comes to getting work done. I like there to be a rule book, even if I don't always follow it. That gives me a little assurance. So when you combine those things together, that in PI terms, that makes me a persuader. That's one of 17 different profiles that give us kind of a shorthand. It's a little bit more precise than that. But in terms of just us talking to one another about to give you an idea of who I am, persuader is what I'm known as.
And it's funny. I find it really funny that the guys who work at the PI all have their profile, name in their email signature. I'm a
Definitely.
persuader, I'm a captain, I'm a venturer.
It's part of what we call it, giving it a common language. So if you say to me, so for example, like when it comes to people who run very large construction companies, they tend to be mavericks, persuaders, captains, venturers, these kind of venturesome people, comfortable with risk, ready to knock through walls, et cetera. But when it comes to your skilled tradespeople, they're more artisans, crafts. When you think about it, like an artisan, a specialist, a guardian, these are people who don't want to make mistakes. They definitely want to follow the rules and know that they're doing things by the book. That gives them a lot of confidence. They take a lot of pride in that, and we need that in certain roles. Where we're starting to see some challenges is that there's a lot of innovation happening in construction. Those two things don't always get along. There's a natural tension between new building materials, new techniques, new drone technology flying around construction sites, taking inventory. You're like, what is this? Like, it makes me very uncomfortable. I'm used to counting it by hand for the last 20 years. These types of things have to be thought of in a way that allows us to really work together constructively and still bring in innovation, but without tweaking people based on who they are. And I think sometimes we move too quickly.
Yeah. Do you believe that people's PI profiles can change?
I don't think that the inherent profile, what we call the self pattern, the true natural, deep down who you are, we see that it's very stable over time. But we have to understand that that is just one lens that tells us who you are, all things being equal. But when are things ever equal? The reality is that I show up in a work situation, all of a sudden, project to project, there could be different demands, different pace, different sets of skills. There could be different people to interact with. So even I'm going to get something different in that regard. And I think that over time too, that the nature of the workforce changes. One of the biggest mistakes that I see, Lee, is that you end up with somebody who runs a construction business. They've had some success, hopefully a lot of success, 20 years in, and they think, I need to hire an electrician. I know what it's like. And then you're like, well, wait a second. You know what it was like 20 years ago. You don't know what it's like now. Like it's totally different. The mindset of the younger people is different. The field requirements are different. The nature of how quickly you're picking up on new tech is different. The building material is different. So, and even the way that they communicate and even get the wiring schematics, like it's all different. So I think being able to say, oh, okay, what does the job require today? What is the nature of the interaction with my specific team? That's the part that can absolutely change over time. And I think we need to recognize that.
Yeah. So in that case, let's say that we've got a younger employee who's just coming into the workforce. Do you think that over time, their profile would fluctuate? And I'm just saying because typically your PI profile or your characteristics are informed by your environment that you're brought up in and experience. Do you think it's from an employer standpoint? Do you think we should be taking that PI and just taking that as gospel and really working towards, building a relationship with that person, using that PI as the kind of guiding principle?
Yeah, that's my recommendation. And then using that as the lens to understand things that might show up in terms of performance, in terms of the promotability, in terms of the leadership capability of these individuals, right? They might be very different. So for example, for somebody like myself as a persuader, the exact opposite profile, totally the opposite of me, would be known as an operator. These are the people you want actually sort of running the details of your business. You don't want me doing that. And so an operator will always be an operator over the course of their life, right? For the most part. And then being able to understand though, that's a lens at how they're going to look at, how do you think that last meeting went? How do you think that this conversation with the client went? How do you think, those types of things become the lens at which we look at behavior, at job, site experience, manager, supervisor interactions, project management tendencies, right? So as that example, when you know that I'm a persuader and this other person is an operator, to have them doing the details on the project, maintaining all the communication, the detailed deliverables, the compliance, but I'm the one who's going to do better, all things being equal, with client relations, smoothing over issues, all that persuasive people type stuff that, shows up when we have to coordinate across multiple stakeholders who don't always agree, trying to help navigate all of that, and creating congenial relationships even across the workforce. So we all have our strengths. We all have our caution areas too, right? There's things that we're just, don't know about ourselves. So it provides a very robust picture of what we have and what we need.
Yeah. So would it be a fair statement to say that typically roles in your business, sales, marketing, hands-on field management, production managers, would you say that there's probably 2 to 3 or 4 profiles that would match those roles specifically, given the character traits that would naturally be associated with those roles?
Yeah, in general, that's true. I think that when you look at people that have to work with and through other folks, you're definitely looking at more extroverted type people than introverted. But that doesn't mean that introverted people can't be effective leaders in their own right, that they can't be great, chiefs of staff and operating people, project managers internally inside the business. But it's the mismatch is where we get into trouble. If we ask somebody to do too many things, we want somebody to be highly detailed and work unsupervised long periods of time, but also schmooze up the client. You're like, whoa, hold on. What just happened there? All of a sudden, if we give them some responsibilities that aren't a natural fit, it's going to take them a tremendous amount of effort and energy, and it's not going to be very enjoyable. And that's when they're going to start asking themselves, maybe this isn't the role for me. I see that happen in smaller shops where we start to say, we just don't have that many people. So we're going to stretch people into these weird shapes. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, you know what? I just got a text from somebody else who's looking for somebody on their job site. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pick up this phone call. And you're like, uh-oh, what just happened?
Yeah. And that's super common. Right? Like this
Super common.
A lot. Yeah.
Well, it's because it's so competitive. And I tell you, when the industry itself is constrained, again, in many regions, when it comes to trying to find the access to be able to get at all that value of finishing these projects and taking on these bids and growing the business, we have to do everything we can to hire the right people, to ensure that we're managing them in a way that's effective. Yes, we need them to do the work, but also that the experience is a positive one, that they feel that we understand them, that we're accommodating whatever their natural style is, and that we develop them for future responsibility and contribution. And when those things don't happen, then all of a sudden somebody's like, you know what, I like my job, I just don't love my job. And that's when they start to wander. So I see that psychometrics and people science, if for lack of a better term, is something that really helps us at every stage. When it comes to the recruitment, it removes a lot of that friction and that confusion all the way through to, the promotion decisions, making sure somebody's, being retained, because the easiest person to hire is the one you never had to replace. Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. Which is funny. I mean, this is the final kind of test, so to speak, when we do things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs training or intrinsic versus extrinsic values, right? Like there's a deeper level of understanding people that you need to acquire as a leader in order to understand the people that you're trying to lead. And I think a lot of people think, they confuse management and leadership, right? They think it's the same thing.
Right.
Can you speak to that a little bit, Matt? Just because you've met so many leaders, like what's the difference? What's the difference between a manager and a leader?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we think about managing, we manage the tactile aspects of a business, right? So when you think about resources and the numbers, and you think about tasks, projects, et cetera, there's always going to be a technical aspect of the business, and that's where management comes in. And the second part, though, leadership to me is really more about the social aspect, the human aspect, the distinctly collaborative and collective aspects of it. And so there's definitely a relationship there, because if we mismanage something, we're going to make it harder to lead those people, because they're going to say, this place is a clown show. That's going to make it tough. But at the same time, without proper leadership, it makes the management of things difficult, because people succumb to competing goals and competing styles, and there's friction and everything gets harder. So I think every listener and you and I can all think about a positive team experience we had. And I suspect that those positive experiences are because the team performed well and the experience of being on that team was a positive one. And the negative experiences, one or both of those were not met, right? Either the team just didn't do very well. It's hard to be on a losing baseball team, or that it performed fine, but it just wasn't much fun to hang out with those people. So as soon as I could get out of there, I did, right? So I think that's what it is. And so to me, management helps make sure the trains run on time. And then the leadership is about making sure that, the trained staff is a team that you really want to be a part of, and that you know where the train is headed. So I think there's a strong relationship between the two, but I think that the biggest thing that holds leaders back is when they stay stuck in that management mode, and they stay stuck in that sort of looking at the business through a mechanical only lens. Yes, we have to do that, but we also have to make sure it's not mechanical only, but that we also get to the meaning side of it, the human side of it, and really make sure people feel like there's something for them in terms of being, really respected as people, and understanding that, we may have to push hard to hit a deadline. That makes sense, but that we exercise some reasonable level of care and understanding and camaraderie, across the team of people who works really hard, and in many cases in safety situations. You don't want there to be lapses. It's not only costly, it's dangerous, and we don't need that.
Right. And you're always relying somewhat on culture, which is a direct kind of byproduct of your leadership of people as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
I always say it's what we reward and punish. And it's not even necessarily as overt as that. It's what people just witness. So if you have somebody who's a tyrant and they just relentlessly drive for the results without taking care of people, and you promote that person, you've just said a lot about what your culture is all about. And don't be surprised if some of the people who have choices about where they want to work and they aren't particularly enjoying that tyrannical form of management, start taking that phone call on that job site, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly when that happens. And then we start to ask ourselves, once it's too late, geez, maybe, Charlie's approach really the only way to get to these results? And by then it's a little bit too late.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally bang on. I can give you a million examples of jobs that I've had from very young that have informed me what good leadership and what bad leadership is. And I remember one of my first ever jobs was an industrial floor layer, and it was tough. I'm talking old school job site. You could still smoke on the job sites, you could still abuse the apprentice, right? Verbally and physically. And I remember this one guy we used to call him the Velvet Hammer, was his nickname when he wasn't looking. And he'd be really nice to your face, and then he would go to your foreman and he'd say, give him hell, give that guy hell, Yeah.
He's the one who wanted to be liked,
yeah.
but felt the only way to get to that performance was to make sure somebody was leaning on you, right?
Exactly.
And I think the other thing that's important to point out is that these things always evolve over time, right? So I mentioned my military service. By the time I went in the Marines in the kind of the early 90s, you think about Marines in the 1960s and 70s, there might even be some listening thinking that was hard. Boot camp was a lot harder then. Well, it was hard when I did it too. They may not have been able to physically, attack you the way that they used to. Some of that went away, but it's probably very different now too. And everything naturally evolves. So sometimes the newer generations get a reputation of being soft. And the reality is that you can complain about it if you want, but it really doesn't do any good. Because if you're holding the line and you're acting like that foreman, and you've got somebody leaning on a person like that, and they have job choices, and if they don't want to put up with it, they don't have to. So you can complain about this generation, you can complain about these new techniques, but guess what? Like, you're going to be complaining while you're still searching for people, and we can't be having that. That doesn't make good sense.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think, like you said, we're in this phase of innovation where the workforce is changing, the environment is changing, the tools are changing. The PI has been around since the 50s, but only now, this is a new tool in your toolbox that will help you adapt to that change,
Yeah.
If
well,
only,
and think about it too, Lee.
Yeah.
When you think about the nature of data, so when you think about people who have built successful businesses, listen to the show, they've been in the business 10, 20 years, the nature of data that you have access to at your fingertips, totally different about all aspects of your business, about inventory, project schedules, profit and loss, everything. And then I ask you, well, tell me about the people data that you're using to actually run a successful business. Crickets. Like, a lot of people are like, we have HR data. We know like some information here and there. We got payroll data. And I'm like, no. The way that what's showing up on the job site, what's showing up on the teams in your candidate pipeline, show me your people data. And they're like, we have data on everything else, but the most expensive thing we have going, we don't have data on that. That doesn't make any sense. So that's why, psychometrics came as a field. We've studied human psychology and we've measured it for, since before the 1900s, but around the 1950s when PI was born, that's when we started applying it at work and starting to understand, what do we know about people that can help us understand the relationship between their job performance and even their personal styles at work. And certainly all these years later, more than 70 years later, we're still on that journey about trying to get it right. Use the term talent optimization. It's not optimal if the performance isn't there. It's not optimal if the experience isn't there. So we're constantly saying, in a world that's shifting around us all the time, how do we use the data we have to inform the techniques we use to get, the win-win of performance and experience? That's the trick.
Yeah. And how do we impart knowledge from one to another when every person learns differently too, right? Like some people, visual learners, some have to read, some have to see data, some need to get hands-on. We talked about this being called that self-actualization peak of Maslow's hierarchy, where you hit concrete and you say, wait, that really hurt. Even though, your dad's been telling you, hey, you're going to fall, you're going to fall, you're going to fall. And I think the PI in that regard just gives you more foresight as to how and when people will fail based on how they learn, right? Like it's incredible.
Totally. And I think that you're making such a great point, Lee. It fast forwards the learning process about people. So the fact is, if I work with somebody for 3 years with no data, I'll pick up data along the way. I'll figure out some things. I'll see what works, trial and error. Oh, he got really upset when I said that one thing, that's that one way, or within, 6 minutes, they could have them complete the predictive index assessment. And all of a sudden I could read it for myself. I could show it to them. We could look at it together. We could compare my profile as a persuader and theirs as an operator and say, wow, these are very different types of people. We're going to have complementary strengths, but we better pre-negotiate when we have differences, because this little bit of awareness is really going to help us. Think about how, if you could fast forward 3 years of learning into a 30-minute conversation, how much trouble would you save yourself versus just trying through trial and error, just figure it out and hurt each other's feelings for quite a while. Like, let's skip all that nonsense.
Yeah. Tons of value there for sure. Tons of value there for sure. I'll give you a direct example of this. Like, I am a captain, right? My profile is a captain. Makes sense, right? But what that means is that I am not naturally I don't adopt systems, routine, and process. I hate routine. I hate process. I hate mundane. But that's exactly why I need it. That's exactly why I need systems, is to counteract my natural ability to avoid them, right?
Right.
That's how we make sure we get things done. So this goes both ways. It highlights the best features. It highlights the best parts of this employee, but it also lets you know, hey, here's your weaknesses, and now it becomes a negotiation. Here's how we need to work together. That's a great point.
And in a lot of business operating systems, they talk about things like, well, somebody has to be the visionary and somebody has to be the implementer. So you're talking about complementary strengths. So somebody on your team who's like you as a captain being like, I'm going to drive through, I'm going to be innovative, I'm nimble, I'm people-oriented, I'm venturesome, but we still need systems to produce predictability, efficiency, reliability. But that's not my strength. I'm going to have somebody else who does that, and we're going to learn how to get along. And I'm going to not only tolerate them, I'm going to celebrate them because we complement each other, right? It is that complementary strength. So I think that's the tricky part, is realizing that no single pattern can handle everything naturally that shows up in a business. Somebody's got to be the cheerleader and make sure the troops are happy. Somebody's got to be the innovator, the driver, the butt kicker. Somebody's got to run the numbers almost objectively, dispassionately. And somebody's got to have to make sure that everything is done like to a T. Right? That's four different major styles. No single person can really cover all those bases adequately once a business gets to a certain size. So now all of a sudden you're talking about managing personality differences. Because if I hire everybody to do their part of the job, those are 4 very different types of people. So again, trying to meld all this together and navigate the inevitable frictions that are going to come up between them without data, Lee, without the insights, that's where businesses waste so much time that could be going into meaningful work, because they're dealing with the, hey, can I talk to you in your office for a second? Oh, geez, here we go. But what a waste of time this is about to be. Or, hey, I got bad news. Oh no, what happened? Who quit? Like when that happens, like you're like, oh my gosh, we are wasting so much energy on things that could be going into delighting our clients and winning bids and cooking off the backlog, doing all these things. Like, oh my gosh.
You're totally right, man. You're totally right. And we see this, right? Like if you think about what it boils down to in any construction business, right? It's admin, finance, sales and marketing, production and operations, right? 3 very different profiles, 3 very different skill sets, 3 very different sets of tolerances. You know, and for you as the owner, yeah, you can bootstrap it and kind of be all head of all 3 departments and kind of get things done to the point that they're done. But you need to decide, what point do I step back and put 3 people in place or 4 people in place who have let's say the character traits to match the tasks that need to be done. And then how do I become a leader? How do I develop the skill to manage multiple people 3 different ways and all at the same time? Yeah. And that's typically my definition of leadership, is a leader who can coach individually, but also lead a team as a group as well. And I think you nailed that, man. Totally.
The leader has to get in the elevator. They have to understand themselves, their own self-awareness. That's like ground floor. Then as they go up in the elevator, like one-on-one relationships, then they might have to manage a team, like a group dynamic. It gets a little more complex. Then as the organizational leader, you're now managing teams of teams and creating culture and creating policy and programs and really doing all of these types of incentive systems, et cetera. So if you're a leader and you're like, I'm only comfortable on the first 2 floors, I wouldn't build a very big house if I were you, right? Because the reality is, like, the bigger the organization gets, the more you have to stretch and the more you have to really empower people at all those lower level floors to do what they need to do, because you can't be everywhere at once. So there's all these things that hold business owners back. But I think the biggest fundamental one of them is lack of access to people, data, and systems to get the people part right. Just full stop.
Yeah. It makes total sense. I mean, if we were trying to diagnose a financial issue, the first thing we'd look at is your profit and loss statement. If we were trying to diagnose a marketing issue, we would look at your return on investment and your customer acquisition costs. I mean, why would we not look at, like you said, our most expensive set in the business and try and apply some sort of data? It
100%.
just makes sense. Do you have any really cool stories about how the PI has changed a business? Like, have you got any examples?
Yeah, I had a podcast interview with a construction company. This was their head of business development. I was talking about the executive dynamics were just not great, not constructive,
Right.
a lot of infighting, a lot of frustration, all well-intentioned people, but ultimately came through and had decided that we're going to use PI. We're going to bring it in. This is a company called Built Tech Solutions. And they came through, a general contractor, right? And basically had said, you know what, we're going to use these people insights about ourselves as a group and understand and really use it to build a bridge between one another and start to look at how we can have a more effective executive team dynamic. Well, what happens when the executive team starts getting along a lot better? It just trickles and cascades down through the organization, because now there's less strain happening when one representative goes through and talks to their team and they're not as frustrated because they're understanding more, et cetera. So I think there's this compounding effect that happens when we start to get the people part a little bit more friction free. And so I thought that was a really great example. And I would say that executive team dynamics, even if they're not outright strained or stressed in some way, that doesn't mean they're particularly effective. So we have to make sure that, if it's a team that's a very special kind of team because it's the senior most team. That's a lot of times where I like to start a PI implementation, even before we bring it into recruitment or managers, because the executives need to understand better than anybody the people aspects of what it is that they do every day. And then I think that can happen pretty quickly. And then from there, I tend to put it into recruiting and hiring. I say, let's stop bringing in the wrong people. That's going to be the next fastest path to value. And then after that, it's now let's start talking about either if management is an issue because you're seeing some turnover, let's get your managers, spun up on their people's data and give them some basic techniques. And then we might look at things like team dynamics. If there's struggles with specific situations around either resistance to technology adoption, certain types of cultural issues, if there's a lot of other places you can take it after that, but it's usually pretty straightforward to start with the executive team, go to put it in hiring, start to look at either manager and or team dynamics, and then all of a sudden things start to get a lot easier. And I think we could use a lot more easy in our lives, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who doesn't want an easier life, right? I would even go a little one step further and say, before you even roll it out to the whole executive team, is start with yourself. Understand yourself better and know, is there any glowing areas where I'm maybe trying to apply leadership or management and it's just not hitting with the team? I would start with myself and say, hey, like, where what do I need to change? What do I need to change first? Is it more structure? Is it more systems? Maybe I'm too friendly with the staff and then it's making it really hard to hold accountability later. Understanding yourself first is crucial. A lot of my clients in our one-to-one program, they're very hesitant to say, hey, I have a problem, because they know I'm going to say, let's start with you and see what you've done. If you've got someone in the business who isn't perhaps working out properly, who is the hire? You let them into your circle. Did you do a PI? No, I didn't. Why not? We've been talking about this for months, right? Here's the link. Go through the PI. And then I find when I get people to actually do it, just everything clicks. It's so fun. It's such a fun conversation,
There is. It is almost that cliff that once you cross over, then all of a sudden it's like I don't know that I could actually get on the phone with an early stage candidate without knowing both the job target, like what are we hiring for, and the person's PI. So all of a sudden it's like, I need that context to be able to do as effective a job I can as an interview team member or a hiring manager, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that what I tend to find is once somebody makes a hiring decision that goes against what the PI suggested, that's when they're bought in for life. They're like, I will never do that again. They learn back to that sort of trial and error thing. Trial and error is too expensive in any environment, especially in this environment. We are in such a high stakes environment right now. Unbelievable. I've never seen a stage of the work, the work environment, the world of work, that is so dynamic and unpredictable and chaotic and frustrating, yet exciting and opportunistic. And the firms that get it right are going to be the ones that learn how to put the people to work and get the right sort of frictionless people processes in a way that drives the business forward. And so I think there's a real set of value for the taking for people who are willing to invest in getting sort of people data and people techniques in a way that still shows up in the results that we care about the most, all the things we watch with our P&L and dashboards and our backlogs and all these things. But it's an exciting time, but it is a high stakes time for sure.
Yeah. I think even if we were to put this into the typical reactive recruitment that a contractor is doing, and again, we're talking about, just entering that 7-figure, potentially on the path to, 3, 4, 5 million, you're slammed busy with everything. You need more layers at this point. This is the part where you can say, hey, I'm too busy to put all this time into recruitment. How do I increase the length of the funnel so that the output is more concentrated and higher quality? And that's definitely where this applies for sure.
Yeah, any moment, any amount of time you waste talking to the wrong people for a job is time that you could have been spending in other parts of your business. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say I'm a contractor, right? I'm listening to this podcast and I'm saying, what are these guys talking about? Psychometric profile. And I'm sure I heard about that on Mindhunter, that show with the FBI guys, right? But I want to check it out. Like, what's my first step here? Like, how do you recommend we use it? What should I be thinking?
Yeah, the easiest thing is go to predictiveindex.com, take the assessment for yourself, just like you said, Lee. Get your results, see what your impression is, raise your self-awareness a little bit, and immediately ask yourself the question, why don't I have this for everybody who's ever worked for me? Because if you can see it in black and white and understand, like, oh my gosh, it makes things so much more clear. And then when you're ready, when you talk to either us or you talk to a consultant of ours in the field, if you have some history with a PI person of the past, or if you're interested in getting some hands-on help in your local geography, then we have an entire network of people that are willing to come in and help out and help you answer questions about how to put it to use in your organization. Whichever path you choose, I think the most important thing is let's just get you the insights you need to run your business the best way possible. And I think you'll be finding that the time savings, the profit margin that you can claim back, it's just really, really powerful. And it beats that to trial and error, like hands down.
Yeah. One thing to mention as well, guys, is this is typically a corporate action, or a part of a corporate business. This is exactly where my experience comes with the PI is in a corporate setting of $1 billion franchise. That doesn't mean that it's not available to guys who are just, 2-man or 3-man. In fact, you guys are probably better off jumping in and doing the PI now and get used to it before you've got 25 employees. Right? Because it will just shorten that learning curve. It will make you better. It will make you a better leader. And like Matt said, there's a link. You can go online, check it out. You can do the PI profile yourself. You can have it back in minutes. It's super fast. We'll actually put a link to it in the show notes here as well. The absolute game changer. It's helped me hire so many great people. It's helped me become such a better leader. It's helped our clients become such a better leader. Highly recommend that you go and check it out. Matt, can you touch on your book for a second? Because you're a published author, right? What led you to writing the book? What's the book about? What's the message in there?
Yeah, the book came about when I was going through this challenging time. I think many of us went through the pandemic and felt like our values were reprioritized a little bit. And so I started to try to understand, like, how can we make sure that we're checking all the boxes? It's amazing that you talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I felt like my elevator on Maslow's hierarchy kind of topped off and I still had further that I wanted to go.
Right.
So today I really talk about it as saying that how do we make sure that we ensure performance and people and purpose? Like all three of those have to be there ideally for us to really flourish and be our full selves at work. So the book is called Expand the Circle because I was thinking about my leadership, how it developed from a point of self-awareness. And then if I expand that circle out to having to learn how to lead one other person, like how can I be a leader in that one-on-one, expand out further to my team, to my entire organization, even out into the world. It doesn't stop, right? Sometimes we draw an artificial boundary around work, but we show up as leaders to our families, to our communities, to our school systems, to wherever we're needed. That's what leadership is. And so that was a very inspired time that I was writing that book and something I still feel very strongly about. I will say that the economic headwinds and other sorts of challenges, the uncertainty we're experiencing is pushing us back down Maslow's hierarchy in many ways.
Right.
And people are struggling because they're getting burned out. They're feeling a lack of meaning and purpose. I think that it's unfortunate. I think it's avoidable, but I do think that it's understandable, right? I don't say that with any judgment. I just say it mostly as a cautionary tale that if you have taking an opportunity to kind of lean on people at a time when they're not at their best, like they're gonna pop. So how do we, yes, performance is non-negotiable, but how do we make sure they feel treated properly as people, that we're looking out for them in their careers, and then also help them find meaning, help them find a contribution to something bigger than themselves. That's something that we have the opportunity, and I would say the responsibility to do as employers. And that's what a lot of the themes that are in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is nothing new. It is, foundational level kind of psychology here. But, what man's saying is when you take people out of that kind of survival mode, those physiological needs, and you start putting them in a place where, they're through the safety needs, right? Physical safety, mental safety, job security, stuff like that. When it goes beyond the paycheck, amazing things happen. And when you have a tool like the Predictive Index to just further enhance that, guys, I'm telling you, this is what high performing teams thrive on, is having this level of data and knowledge. And if you want that training, feel free to reach out to me or Matt for the PI, right? He's got an incredible team. I've worked with a PI advisor before. Absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, leadership, it never stops, right? Leadership never ends. Like Matt said, he went through Maslow's hierarchy and he found even a higher hierarchy than what was there. So leadership never stops. It's a constant lesson that's always evolving. Let's put a tool in your hand that gives you the ability to lead your people better, that gives you the ability to look at yourself and say, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? How can I lead people better and show up every day in a better way, not only for my team, but also for my family and anyone who comes into my circle? And it starts with the PI, guys. Go get your data, right? 6 minutes, like Matt said, it's online. Link in the description here. And I'll give you a challenge. Ping us back an email. Let us know what your result is, right? Let us know what you got. We would love to see what the kind of demographic is. Are you an operator? Are you a venturer? Are you a captain? I always find it super interesting, just the broad spectrum of people who find themselves owning businesses with their profile, right? And shout out to my assistant, by the way, because I had to hire someone who was directly opposite from me. I needed a scholar. I'm a captain. I needed a scholar, so someone across the T's and dots the I's. Without the PI, I never would have found the right person. So thanks to Matt and his team for giving us the opportunity to do that. Matt, let's wrap things up here. What's one piece of advice, whether it's PI, whether it's leadership or anything, what would be one piece of advice would you give to the leader of a business?
Yeah, I'd say it's this revelation that every business is a people business. We may focus on all the mechanical bits and the spreadsheets and the technical aspects and the materials and the purchase orders and all this stuff, because we have to, I get it. But at the end of the day, every business is a people business, whether you're in hard industry or not. And I think that because of that, if you're a leader that wants to make the maximum contribution, if you want to grow your business to reach its full potential, you have to really make some effort to study the people part, to have the right people data. So I think that when you do that, the business results tend to take care of themselves if we fully go all the way. And yet we can really enhance people's lives. I think about somebody at some point is going to get hired, or is going to get promoted. And can you imagine if the business owner calls that person's spouse and tells her, hey, you know what, just your husband's doing a fabulous job. We were so proud to promote him. Thank you for allowing him to spend his time with us. He's really making a difference at work. That dude is never going to leave, right? Because she's not going to let him leave. And so it's like, it's just one example. How long does it take? It's fast and free to do that. But that's what people leaders do. They understand, they see the people behind the people, and they're not thinking just about sort of what they need from the individual. They think about the entire people system. So that's the gift I would give, is to say, let's pick up our gaze enough just to see the world that we're in, which is a people-centric world of work, and not let the work kind of give us this distorted view of it. And guess what's going to happen is that all that good business stuff is going to flow naturally because we got the people part right.
Love that, man. What a cool message. That's an absolutely phenomenal message. And I'm going to give you guys a challenge. I want you to sit there as we end this podcast, and when the volume stops and it goes quiet, I want you to say these words. I want you to say, we are a people development business that happens to do X. And insert whatever your trade, whatever your industry is. And start with that. People development. That will have so many, like a butterfly effect. It will ripple through your entire business. People, customers, money, right? Like that's the exact flow to do it in. I love that, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Matt. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. If anybody's big on LinkedIn, I spend a lot of time over there. Certainly through predictiveindex.com. If you mention my name, people will get you in touch with me. I would love to continue the conversation. If you have any questions I couldn't address today, would love to spend some time and say hello.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. We'll see you another time, hopefully.
Thank you, Lee. It's been an honor to spend some time with you. Appreciate it.